The darce, anaconda, and arm and guillotine are all connected and form a system, the front headlock choke system. Using these chokes together gives you a powerful system to attack using them based off not only your preference but also your opponent's reaction, as you need to take what's available for the path of least resistance. All three are available from the front headlock, where you have one arm under the neck and one arm under the armpit, either with your hips facing down towards the mat or up towards the sky. This is the inverted front headlock, and as you can see, I use it to enter the anaconda. Just like the front headlock itself, for all three chokes, you have one arm under the neck and one arm under the armpit. That's what makes it so easy to switch between them and use them as a system. For an anaconda choke, you grip your bicep under the armpit, and for a darce choke, you grip your bicep under the neck. For an arm and guillotine, both your grips are under the chin, hand over hand. Many grapplers have a hard time avoiding neck cranking their training partners with these chokes because they simply don't have a solid grasp on proper choking mechanics, meaning choke bites, elbow positioning, and rotational pressure. Choking mechanics are essential to hit clean chokes that are all choke and no neck crank. Of course, a tap is a tap in competition, but the pursuit of perfect technique should always be the goal. Perfect technique to put your opponent to sleep if they refuse to tap, as not everyone will tap to pain. The darce, anaconda, and arm and guillotine all have the same finishing mechanics. Let's look at those mechanics and then entries into the front headlock. We'll start with the darce. There's a hard part of the neck, which is muscle, and a soft part of the neck where the carotid artery is located. Putting pressure on the hard part of the neck will just cause pain. Putting pressure on the soft part of the neck will block off blood flow to the brain. You need to put pressure on the soft part of the neck for a clean, all choke, no neck crank darce. The key to a clean darce is elbow positioning. The way you position your elbow will determine whether the pressure of your forearm is going to the hard part of the neck or the soft part of the neck. If your elbow is low, the pressure will go to the hard part of the neck and put pressure on the muscle. By raising your elbow up towards the armpit, your forearm will then be in line with the soft part of the neck. Your pressure has to go somewhere, and it's essential to make sure that you can feel the soft part of the neck before applying any pressure. You see this big gap here? This is a weak choke bite. A choke bite means to position the pivot point as close to the neck as possible, as well as angled correctly to hit the soft part of the neck. By lifting your elbow, you position your forearm parallel with the soft part of the neck and take away that gap. Taking away that gap creates a strong choke bite. When you enter into a darce, you shoot your arm underneath their armpit and underneath their neck. Lifting up on the head will allow you to shoot your arm deep so you can take a strong grip on your bicep. But if you try to finish with a deep grip, you're going to be putting pressure on the hard part of the neck because the pivot point will be angled incorrectly. In this case, the pivot point is the inner elbow, which is why once your arm is deep, you need to retract your arm so that only your hand is peeking out behind their head. Retracting your arm for a shallow grip will allow you to raise your elbow to position your pivot point correctly. If your arm remains deep, your elbow will be unable to lift. And due to the angle of your elbow, the pressure will just go to the hard part of the neck. Once you have your arm retracted, you can now raise your elbow to take proper elbow positioning. Now you can squeeze. Squeezing will force your forearm into the neck, but this isn't enough. You must also force their neck into your forearm. It's a dual motion for maximum pressure. Back to the scissor analogy, it's one blade going up and one blade going down. It's not just one blade going up. You force their neck into your forearm by pushing their head down, while your forearm presses up. To do this, you need rotational pressure. Watch how both my elbows rotate, and my torso pushes down on the head. Force is being applied both up and down like scissors. If you only rotate, you'll just neck crank your opponent, and if you only squeeze, you likely won't be able to generate enough pressure to cut off blood flow. Doing both simultaneously will ensure it's a clean choke before it's ever a neck crank. Let's first look at entering into the darce from the standard front headlock with your hips facing down when your opponent is in turtle. From here, you need to transition yourself to the side of your opponent. This will enable you to shoot your arm that's underneath your opponent's armpit deeper, so you can take a gable grip above their head. This is what's called a quarter Nelson, and you use it to take your opponent from their knees to their side. The reason you want to bring your opponent to the side is because if you try to lock it up now and finish, you won't be able to get rotational pressure on your opponent. You won't be able to push their head to force their neck into your forearm. You can only squeeze, and unless you're significantly stronger than your opponent, you won't be able to get enough pressure on the carotid artery. You'll only have pressure in one direction. Additionally, it's a lot easier for your opponent to escape when they're on their knees. You bring them to the side by pressing your forearm down onto the back of their head, causing them to flip. Now you shoot your arm deep, grip your bicep, retract your arm to allow for proper elbow positioning, squeeze your arms to put pressure on the soft part of the neck, and rotate to push their head to push the soft part of their neck into your forearm. When you flip them onto their side using the quarter Nelson, you need to be careful not to flip them too far and onto their back, as it's more difficult to lock up the darce when your opponent is on their back because it makes your grip too shallow and difficult to grab your bicep. Watch how in this clip my grip becomes too shallow to grab my bicep. If you do flip your opponent onto their back, you'll be unable to adjust your elbow for proper positioning or get the same rotational pressure as them being on their side. So instead, you can go with their movement and rotate your body all the way through for a belly up darce, where you guessed it, your belly is pointed up instead of down. As you roll through, you still need proper elbow positioning. You need to drop it down towards the armpit, rather than up when your belly is facing the mat. Now you walk your legs to theirs. This will give you that rotational pressure by pushing on the back of their head as you drop your elbow down. If you catch their legs, this is optimal, as you don't want them running around in circles trying to hide their legs to prevent rotational pressure. If your opponent manages to get to their knees, you don't want them there, as it's easier to defend and escape from their knees. You need to bridge into them to flip them back onto their side. As a rule of thumb, you want to keep people off their knees and off their back to finish darces. The only time it's alright for them to be on their knees is if you have a guard, because you can still get that rotational pressure. Although there are many positions to finish a darce, doing so from knee on belly is the best way to practice and master rotational pressure in my opinion, because you can easily base with your head, so your arms can move freely to rotate. But you can finish from mount, the side, belly up, guard, or wherever is the path of least resistance for you, based off not only your preference, but also your opponent's reaction. You just need to position yourself in a way that allows for proper elbow positioning and rotational pressure. Now let's look at the Anaconda Choke. But first, and now a quick word from the sponsor of today's video, Elements. If you train Jiu-Jitsu, then chances are you're often plagued with fatigue and muscle cramps. I used to suffer from those as well, so much so that I wouldn't be able to train properly. Now the main reason that this happens is due to the loss of electrolytes through sweat, primarily sodium, and when sodium isn't adequately replaced, that's when those muscle cramps and fatigue kick in, which is why I started drinking Elements. Elements is a tasty electrolyte drink mix with a science-backed electrolyte ratio of sodium, potassium, and magnesium. It contains no sugar, no coloring, no artificial ingredients, none of that junk. Plus, it's used by everyone from NBA players, Olympic athletes, Navy SEALs, to everyday exercise enthusiasts. And right now, Element is offering my listeners a free sample pack with any order. That's 8 single serving packets free with any Elements order. This is a great way to try all 8 flavors or share Elements with a salty friend. Get yours at drinkelement.com/JordanTeaches. This deal is only available through my link. You must go to drinkelementT.com/JordanTeaches. Let's now look at the mechanics of the Anaconda Choke. Elbow positioning is again essential for your pressure to go to the soft part of the neck. If your elbow is high, your pressure will just go to the armpit. Remember, the pressure needs to go somewhere and the armpit is not where you want it. By positioning your elbow low towards the mat, you line up your forearm parallel the soft part of the neck. Now when you squeeze, your forearm will press into the carotid artery. To press their neck into your forearm, you need rotational pressure. You do this by pressing your chest into their head, rotating your body into them. Again, referencing the scissor analogy, it's one blade going up and one blade going down. Often, your opponent will try to flare their elbow to relieve pressure of the neck going into their forearm. This additionally makes it harder to lock up in the first place. To counter this, you need to lift up with your hips to push their arm across their body using your hamstring, and keep it there for better control and to create even more pressure, forcing their neck into your forearm. When you enter into the Anaconda from the standard front headlock with your hips facing down, many like to lock it up and then roll through to finish, but in my opinion, this is wrong. To me, it's like trying to hit a sweep without first taking your opponent's post out, and it's harder to lock up in the first place unless you have long arms, which is why I like to use the same methodology as the Darce. Take your opponent off their knees and then lock it up. To do this, you again gable grip and force their arm across their body to take out their post. And now just tuck your head so you don't crush it and roll through and then lock it up to finish. Now let's look at the mechanics of the arm-in guillotine, a choke that so many people have a hard time getting right and tend to favor the arm-out guillotine instead. But I much prefer the arm-in guillotine, as unlike the arm-out guillotine, the arm-in guillotine has the advantage of being able to switch to the Darce and Anaconda, as well as not giving up the control that the front headlock offers. For the arm-in guillotine, you grip hand over hand, 4 fingers over the blade of the other hand, the same grips as the front headlock itself. The only thing that differentiates the front headlock from the arm-in guillotine is if you're actually trying to finish with the guillotine or just using it for control. The way you want to position your grips for the arm-in guillotine is your opponent's neck just a little bit past where your hand rounds, the hard part of your wrist/forearm. And now you lift your wrist upwards to press it into the soft part of the neck. You should be able to feel the soft part of the neck. If you don't, you're likely too deep and will put pressure on the trachea and risk injuring the throat. Lifting your wrist up presses it into the carotid artery, but you also need to press the carotid artery into your wrist. And again, use rotational pressure to push their head down. Push your wrist into the soft part of the neck and push their head to force their neck into your wrist. From your guard, you need to be on your side to get rotational pressure. This will enable you to actually rotate. If you're on your back, it'll be tougher to rotate, but you can still push their head inward with your bicep. This does cause a little more discomfort for your partner, so I don't always like to finish like that. From your guard, you need to position your legs in a way where your opponent can't jump to the other side to pass your guard. If this happens, you should just let go of the guillotine, otherwise you run the risk of getting von Flue choked. My preferred way to grip with my legs is using the shin of my inside leg across the belly, and my outside leg gripping behind the back. When I can't get on my side because my opponent is countering well by driving into me, I like to transition to the inverted front headlock or the mounted arm-in guillotine. For a mounted arm-in guillotine, just like the Darce, you need to keep your opponent off their back, as it'll be harder to create rotational pressure. You need to keep them off their back, and you do that by catching them with your heel to keep them on their side, even if just slightly. With them on their side, you can create that rotational pressure, but with them on their back, they can stiffen out and it's much harder to get. Similar to you being on your back when you're in your guard. You transition to the mounted guillotine or the inverted front headlock by pushing off the mat with your outside foot and lifting up with your inside foot, similar to a butterfly sweep. Now let's look at entries into the front headlock. The grips of the front headlock compared to the arm-in guillotine are pretty much the same, other than you can grip the chin a little closer to the round of the hand for a little better control of the chin, which is always important to control, especially before you transition to a choke. You can stay where you are from the inverted front headlock to transition to the Anaconda, or turn to your knees to attack the Darce. My favorite entry is the rolling front headlock, a technique that people on Instagram and TikTok love to tell me doesn't work. Obviously it does work, and if you try this, just be careful like I am, as anytime you have falling body weight, and especially with control of the head, it can be a recipe for disaster if you're reckless. The best time to go for this is when your opponent is looking up at you, because their head will be off the mat and there will be room for you to shoot your arm underneath their chin. It's especially useful if they're trying to outbalance you forward. Instead of fighting against it, you go with their momentum and enter into the front headlock. Why pass the guard if you can just do a rolling front headlock? Underhooks. Basically, anytime your opponent has underhooks, this is a great time to enter their front headlock, as your opponent's underhook gives you access to gripping underneath their armpit. You can make them pay for what otherwise would have been a great offensive grip for them to take. This works especially great from half guard when your opponent isn't using their T-Rex arms as they should, or from side control, knee on belly, even mount. Basically any position where your opponent underhooks you. Standing. When your opponent does a poor job of protecting their neck, this is a great time to enter the front headlock. In fact, I often don't fight the hands as often as I should because I'm so confident in my guillotine. Don't be like me though, fight the hands. You can learn all about how to fight the hands in my upcoming Wrestling for Jiu-Jitsu instructional, coming out soon with former D1 wrestler Joe Breeza. Guard. When your opponent leads with their head, this is a great time to snatch up their neck. Leading with their head meaning that their head is past their knees. This isn't necessarily always a bad thing to do if you position your head and weight correctly, but often people will pass with their head right there for the taking. And if it's not there for the taking, you can often just push it to where you need it. Turtle. We've already covered turtles, so there's not much to say about it, other than you can always transition to the back if you feel like you can't easily get underneath the chin. I've added a whole new section on choking mechanics in my Jiu-Jitsu theory course, so make sure to pick that up to level up your Jiu-Jitsu. Let me know if you suffered from some pretty bad neck cranks from these chokes that are poorly performed. Hopefully your training partners watch this video and that's no longer the case. Thanks for sticking around till the end of the video. If you're still here, please leave a comment or a fist bump, and I'll see you guys next time.